It was lonely out here. Friendship in space was hard, let alone romance. His eyes stared at the line. She was... Zed sighed. Come on, she was... What? What was she? You can picture her, just... He leaned back. A drone clinked across the floor of his room on its spidery metal legs. The safety orange-painted thing leaped into the air to hover over a wadded-up ball of paper. It grasped it like a claw before returning the abandoned idea to the waistband where it belonged. Her hair was... orange, Zed wrote down. Good start, he told himself. He dropped his pencil and pushed his notebook away to the far corner of the desk. Maybe a log will help, Zed said to the drone as it floated back and landed. The small machine's green slit eyes stared back, aglow with ignorance. Zed exhaled and closed his eyes. He breathed slowly and focused on the plane of existence above him. His metallic fingers curled and bunched the fabric of his uniform. Finally, it gave way. Welcome to Aeon P Industries' collective consciousness. The neon dream welcomed him. All activity, thoughts, expressions, and sensations within the company noosphere are monitored and may be subject to penalty or classified as company property. Yeah, Zed whispered. Log, Zed Holtfield, WP-7 Waste Disposal Planet, Dantioch 9. Begin log. His vestigial verbal command anchored his thoughts on his task. One barge today, high-velocity landing, in Sector A27. Searched through it and found mostly chemical waste. Most tanks ruptured, but the 3 I did find intact have been marked for drone retrieval and catalogued. Zed's concentration wavered as he stifled a cough. He reached out with his eyes slightly open to grab the bottle near him. There was a momentary stab of pain in his head, and his hand jerked out, knocking the open bottle onto the desk. The dark liquid seeped into his notepad, turning the old paper black. Shit, he swore. End log. He rotated the now mostly empty bottle back into place. Zed looked at the statuesque drone. Hopefully the connection was cut before that. The drone stood still and silent as always. Come on, don't just stand there, get me another drink. A woman with orange hair greeted him. Hey, happy birthday. He felt his face pull into a grin as she handed him the cake. 30 candles burned atop it. It meant something to both of them. She placed the cake on the table. A wooden table. He looked up at the woman, past her towards the dim reflection in the glass window. His face was gone, but his smile was still there. An immovable, grinning skull of chrome. The reflection's eyes burned red. 2 more candles in the dark. No, none of this is real, he thought and pulled away. The dream faded. He was back where he was supposed to be. Back where it was supposed to be. Cracks of gunfire sounded from somewhere far off. Buildings stood like islands in a sea of smoke. Occasional deep glows of red pierced the haze. More eyes. It looked down at its hand. The metal fingers covered with stains of red. The cold steel quickly sapping the living warmth from the ichor. Zed woke up and gasped. He looked around and down at his hands. They were metal, but there was no blood. What kind of new sphere dream was that? He asked no one. He grabbed his shoulder where his cybernetics met his flesh. He rubbed the joint, groaning with every motion. A drone floated into view, ready and waiting for an order. Zed lay back to remember his dream. It was so vivid, but not. Was that a real dream? He laughed. Rolling over, he grabbed his notebook from under his head and began to write everything he could remember. Her hair was orange, and she was from Earth that was. Imagine that. Zed gestured his pen to the drone. Old Earth. 10,000 light years from here. 10,145, actually. He looked up from the page. I don't know how I know that either. Zed stopped writing and looked at the drone. I'm talking to myself now. He rubbed his joints again. I'm going to do a diagnostic on my implants. Zed stopped when he realized he was talking to himself again. He closed his eyes and breathed, and focused on the mental trigger to enter the noosphere. Breathe in, and... Zed screamed. His limbs convulsed, and the guts in his body wriggled like angry cobras in their carbon fiber basket. Zed tasted blood. I bit my tongue. Finally, the spasm stopped. He whimpered to himself as he grabbed his head, like holding the sides of it would keep his cranium from exploding. Zed snapped his eyes shut, trying to force the pain away. When he opened them, the drone stayed where it was, watching in implacable silence. He rolled onto his back and sighed. The noosphere is down. With no one to talk to, Zed looked back to the drone. No harm in talking to a robot, I guess, as long as it doesn't talk back. He stopped, remembering the chrome's skeletal face and the blood. Zed held his head in silence until he fell back asleep. The bed rumbled. Zed grumbled as the monitor lit up above his head. He rolled over and looked at the seismograph readout. Another barge, he sighed. Another day, another $1, right? The drone, his impassive night watchman, said nothing. His suit slid over his shoulders and thighs, sealing to his artificial skin. Come on, he called to the drone as it floated in place by the airlock like an expectant puppy. The frozen landscape of WP-7 flashed a non-polarized glare to meet him. Zed's helmet turned from a light blue to a deep indigo in response, as the red indicator for the barge impact site guided him towards the craggy horizon. Another beautiful day. Zed turned to the floating robot as it marched along towards the site. So, I was thinking of a story about Earth that was, Zed continued. Something during the Robot Crusade. I don't know much about them, but next time I can get back home off the bugged corporate noosphere, I'll do a little research. They crested the crash site's crater. The thick ammonia ice was blasted out into a fine dust around the hole. After you. Zed knelt and slid down the slick surface into the wreck after his companion. At the bottom, he ground the chemical snow between his fingers. Imagine that. People used to be stuck on one little planet. The drone's rectangular eyes flashed bright green to light the way through the twisted carcass of the crash. Zed checked the deep shadows cast by the jade lantern that followed him. Lots of scrap metal, that's for sure. The pair stopped at a crumpled bulkhead. You mind? Zed asked. He turned away from the drone's work, and for a moment he began the ritual noosphere access before he stopped. He rubbed the back of his helmet, a fruitless attempt at massaging his input port. Alright, Zed manually opened his radio to all frequencies. This is Yard Overseer 02. All drones to me at... Before he could finish, the speakers in his helmet began to squeal with interference. Zed quickly shut the signal off. He turned to the drone as it struggled to pull the damaged door away. We do this the old-fashioned way, then. Zed reached his arm out to grab the jagged metal. Before he could grasp the obstruction, an orange claw grabbed the edge, shadowing his movement. Zed jumped. Whoa! The second pulled with the first, the bent metal peeling back. You got here fast. The heart of the wreck was malignant. Zed's now small team orbited the area with a will-o-wisp of a glow. The center of the room had a jagged, sarcomatoid structure of broken glass and razor-like barbs. That may have been a holographic display at some point. Zed ran his hand along the mutated steel. This isn't a barge. Someone crashed a whole ship here. Looks worse for the wear anyway, but that means parts. He looked toward the drones, his partners in this find. If anyone wants a cut, say aye. Zed laughed. He predictably got no answer. Zed was about to continue when the lights of the drones shut off in unison. He looked up from the strange monolith. The drones all stopped in place, hovering in silence. A dim purple and pink light caught his eye, seeping from under a fallen roof plate. Zed made his way over, pulling the debris away to reveal a large, flat, rhomboid crystal, still glowing with the dying power of the ship. A data crystal, Zed thought. Now that's real money. Zed held out his hand, drawing his fingers close to the device. No, Zed thought, just catalog it. He began to pull his hand away, but his arm stopped. Zed looked at his hand. It wasn't working. He moved his other arm and grabbed his rogue limb, trying to pull it away. Half of his body fought to touch the crystal. The other fought to escape. Zed could feel the motors trembling, vibrating up his shoulders and into his chest as the limbs fought each other. Another hand grabbed his arresting arm. Zed turned to see one of the drones, its spindly legs wrapped around the wrist he could control. The small robot pulled his good arm away, not just from his other hand, but pulled the entire limb from his torso in one quick, fracturing motion. Zed's other arm jerked free of his hold and touched the crystal. The lights of the remaining cybernetic limb flashed the same lavender glow as the data matrix. It felt like fire crawling up his arm. Zed began to scream as his remaining arm began to convulse and spasm, the creeping agony making its way up toward his heart. He only had one idea. Zed swung his body, planting the arm in a wide crack in the hole, and he wrenched it once, twice, and finally, the poisoned limb ripped free. Zed stumbled back, wheezing with the effort. He dropped to his knees. Help, he rasped. The drones had moved to hover around him. One still had his shattered arm in its grasp. Zed closed his eyes and braced for the pain of the new sphere link. I have to get help. I have to get help. His thoughts slowed. He felt the link, but instead of searing agony, his nerves went cold. The virtual dream space, the unreal electric cityscape was gone. In its place, a mimic of his dream, a dark fake sky, and the ashes of a city holding embers of fading data. Zed opened his eyes, a small gasp escaping his lips. Glowing red eyes looked back. For a moment he thought there was an intruder in the wreck with him, but the eyes were part of his helmet display, red squares looking back at him through his visor. He felt cold. His thoughts were icy sharp. Zed felt one hand on his shoulder, the delicate proxy of touch from a drone. Its sharp digits resting gently on him. Zed closed his eyes again and slipped quickly back to the dark chamber in his thoughts. It soothed. It cajoled him back to the Mechropolis. It had something to show him. 10,000 light years away, traveling 10,000 years, riding a radio signal from Earth that was. New purpose, resurrect his kindred. They were Point Zero, a nidus in the perfect metallic petri dish. The drones moved to replace the Mechromancer's lost arms, their claws flexing to his will. He got to work cutting a jagged steel plate, bending it until it wrapped around his helmet and the slack face beneath. How does it look? A new me for my birthday, Oz asked. A floating drone looked back. I think so too. He felt cold. His thoughts, my wife,